my plan was just to kind of say, like, it goes from Hera, then we see Ahsoka, there's this journey, Jacen hears the lightsabers, whatever. Anyway,
lightsabers.
I think lightsabers, yes.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's time for me to say, I'm Nate.
I'm Rach.
And this is Pew Pew Time.
Pew pew.
We're talking about, I thought episode 4 here, chapter 4, was going to be the big one of the season. But it feels like chapter 5 is now the big one of the season. And if you've been on TikTok, you know that that's the case. Everybody's losing their mind about this episode, especially big prequel fans and Dave Filoni fans and everything.
Sure.
And I mean, like, I don't call myself a huge prequel fan, but like, I loved this episode. It was
there
lot
was
of the
something
things
about
I love about Star Wars, and
yeah.
I mean, we'll dig into it, but let's get started with a recap. Rachel, take it away.
Sure. All right. So we open on the planet where everything had just happened. Hera has landed. Ahsoka and Sabine are nowhere to be found. Obviously, we know where they are, but Hera does not. In the moment, Hera ends up spotting Huyang, who's holding Sabine's helmet. There's a moment there. Next, it jumps to Ahsoka. She's standing next to Anakin, and they kind of have this moment. They connect, a little banter, a little, kind of reminiscing, and then it gets a little more serious. That she's starting to remember a bit more about what had happened, and he's like, "You still have a chance to live." He says that she needs to finish her training. And that's kind of where it is. And he's like, you got to choose, you're going to live or die. And they start to fight. We're back at Hera and the crew. Everyone's trying to figure out what's happened to Ahsoka, to Sabine. And Jacen kind of calls attention to, he's hearing something in the water. We're back watching in the World Between Worlds, where Ahsoka is dropped, we'll say, into her past. We see scenes from what would be the Clone Wars. Obviously the initial scene is the start of her kind of journey as a warrior, and that whole thing kind of is a part of what we'll talk about. And then everyone's still trying to figure out on the surface what Jacen has heard. The story of Hera and the crew is just this search the whole time. We jump back and forth, the whole episode of kind of that their process of trying to find Ahsoka. As this progression happens with Ahsoka and Anakin, they have a moment on Mandalore where, the discussion gets heavier again, and suddenly we're back, and Anakin is not quite so chipper friendly. He's less of episode 2 and more of episode 3 Anakin. We see some darker, we see the clothing change, all that. We have a little flicker of Darth Vader. There's a red lightsaber instead of blue. And the battle kind of ensues between the two of them. Again, kind of saying she needs to choose whether she's going to live or die. She's tested. She prevails. Anakin's gone. The next thing we see is that she's being lifted from the ocean. Hera and the crew have saved her. And boom, she comes up with this idea, the Purgle. How are we going to get to the people we're trying to save and also destroy the Purgle? So that is the next journey. The fleet shows up, and Ahsoka escapes with Huyang inside of a Purgle. The end.
Man, there are a million things. I mean, this could be a 5-hour episode. So
let's not do that. I don't think the fans would appreciate it.
All of our fans. You don't think Carl would appreciate it?
No, no, or our mom.
Yeah. Well, she's a big Star Wars fan from the beginning, so I'm sure.
Yeah. There we go.
She gets the jokes and the references at every level. And that is something I want to mention. There are so many references in this episode to previous Star Wars things, right? Mm-hmm. And like gosh, I wish I could go through every single one. I didn't note every single one, but I'll bring up the ones that I think of. It was, I mean, I think I said this about in one of the episodes of Mandalorian, but it feels like a love letter to the like sort of Star Wars fans especially of the animated pieces and the prequel. So, like the Clone Wars episodes 1, 2, 3, and Rebels.
Yeah. And since we're not jumping, I mean, we're not gonna be able to talk since we're doing the thematic kind of thing. I think now's the time if you want to share some of those moments. One that that we talk about, and we'll talk more about it when we dig into stuff. But just the reflection on kind of the test that Ahsoka has that is similar to Luke's. You mentioned, that's I won't really fight you. Like some of even the phrases.
I want to bring that up as we talk about that. So that's the first big theme we want to talk about. You mentioned the helmet. Huyang is out there. Hera thinks that whatever, he might be a threat. She hears a noise. She comes around the stone, and there's Huyang, like a sad little boy. Holding this helmet, like sorrowful. And I've talked before on this podcast about the nature of emotions, and we talk about droids expressing emotions and everything. And part of my feeling has always been, the way I've sort of explained that away, is this sort of like, if you're familiar with the Halo series, Cortana, who is like an AI, right? She, like, they talk about this what's it called, rampancy? Is that right? But she basically like loses her mind over time. It's like, software degrades over time, like, hardware degrades over time, and little by little pieces of the original program are missing and whatever, like that sort of thing. So I always sort of figured the older a droid gets, the more sort of, they might just be cantankerous or just unpredictable. And so, like in Huyang's case, like, if we can say, and again, this is a pretty a broad idea, whatever, but if age and, like, long-term staying online without having your memory wiped equals personality and, unpredictability and emotion, then Huyang being like ancient almost as the Jedi, like, he would have a great deal. Anyway, but it was a really sweet moment. You mentioned that you could hear the sadness in his voice, and it really was. It was like, oh
my gosh.
He says, what is it he says?
He's like, I told them. Well, he says, I said that they should stay together. They never listen. And then he says it like heavier. They never listen. Like, it's just this, like, he's so sad that they're gone. And he told them, because he found her helmet would have been in the woods. Remember, it got left behind. And then he's having,
Shin.
So anyway.
Anyway, that was very sweet. There are a lot of things, but like I said, we got enough in these themes that we can probably just start digging in. There is, I think I have one thought at the end, but we'll just dig in. So the first big theme, which I don't know if calling it theme, it's more like A story, B story sort of thing. Is the completing of Ahsoka's training. And then I later added / Jedi Trial. So right off the bat, the thing that I was sort of losing my mind about last episode was, what is Anakin at this point? You know what I mean? Is he supposed to be a Force ghost? Is that what they're doing? And if it is, it doesn't feel consistent exactly, because first of all, he's not glowing blue. You can explain that away by saying he's in the world between worlds. The Force works differently there or something, right? That's what a lot of people have said. But there's also the question of, like, he's not wearing the Jedi robes that we see him in when he becomes one with the Force or whatever at the end of Return of the Jedi.
It doesn't seem like they should be able to change clothes.
Right. It was my big question at the end of last episode, and unfortunately they didn't exactly answer it. Now I'm very satisfied. I'm very happy with the way a lot of these things went, but that's still a question for me, is, are they going to sort of explain that? And to be honest, I'm wondering, maybe we haven't seen the last of him in this series. It's possible he'll show up again. I don't know.
I feel like our experience with the World Between Worlds, this isn't the end of it with Ahsoka. Like, for her to have gotten there and then out all in one episode is like, oh, that's it. World Between Worlds. It feels like it's going to come back. Something's going to happen that's going to bring us back to that. Whether it's Ezra, whether we end up encountering him later, whatever. It feels like, because we know he's been there too. And anyway, Yeah.
Well, a lot of people have been fascinated by the World Between Worlds, myself included, for its potential for time travel and this sort of like traveling great distances and that sort of thing, like seeing these moments in whatever other places and other times. And I think Dave Filoni said, and I've heard other people echo it now on TikTok, that the strength, the value, the power in the World Between Worlds is knowledge, not time travel. And that's sort of what we saw here, right? Was
absolutely.
Ahsoka got the chance to go back and finish her training. Now, I don't know. How much we want to break down and try to do this chronologically, but they have a moment where they speak, and there's this sort of she says master, whatever, and turns around and it's him, and she's like, you look the same, and he goes, you look old, or whatever, like, you got older, and anyway, they're trying to mimic some of the banter they had. Like, it was kind of sweet, but then fairly quickly it turns to live or die, right? And Ahsoka says, I won't fight you. I don't think she says I will not fight you, which is actually the Luke line. And that was one of the first big references I noticed was this mirroring Luke's journey, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And that'll come back here in a little bit. I want to talk about that in a minute, but let's move on for the moment.
Yeah.
I made a joke. I said, like all family reunions, it quickly turned to a fight to the death. Tale as old as time. But it really is, it's the sort of like, when you think about Ahsoka's life, we've talked a lot about Sabine and how much family she's lost. We talk about Ahsoka too. It's like, she left her family very young to be part of the Jedi Order, and then felt betrayed by them and walked away from the Order and felt like, again, as we've seen, her conviction about the war and the nature and the place of the Jedi in it, that's been a problem. So anyway, so she walked away from it, which was her only family, and now it sounds like since then she's basically just bounced around to whoever kind of needed help, right? So she's got some old friends and she visits people who in there. Now she's got Huyang a little bit, and she apparently had Sabine for a while, but it's like, to see her old master now after all this time, when basically every Jedi she knew is dead, it's like, that's gotta, of course she's obviously conflicted there because there are good things and bad things that come with that. But
and it was really him at the pinnacle of when things were great, when she was in training, when he was this powerful, awesome Jedi, that's who she sees in this moment, which is cool.
Right. So he looks, you can tell that they've de-aged him a little bit, but again, they did better than they did. They did better than they did in Kenobi. In Kenobi, he doesn't look, Kenobi. But anyway, they clearly, they start fighting and everything, and lightsaber battles, and you can tell she's a little cocky, but the truth is she always was a little cocky,
Yeah.
And it's sort of she is her master's Padawan, right? The sort of he's pretty cocky, she certainly got a little of that from him. It was
and we that comes up again at the end, this idea that everything he's learned, everything he is, he's taught her. That's the conversation they have at the very end and of this kind of journey, trial, whatever. But
so there's this moment right there at the beginning where she said something about well, maybe there's not much more I can learn from you or something, and I'm like, man, I feel like that was a mistake. The moment she said that, I was like, I think he's not that he's toying with her, but I'm like, man, the stuff he's we see Darth Vader do, it's like even him at his peak and fighting Obi-Wan and that sort of thing. It's like, man, I don't know if she's really seeing the full force yet. But anyway, just then he cuts the ground out from under her and she falls. And so it's like, all right, well, bring back a little humility or whatever.
Sure.
But then it falls back to this Clone Wars era thing, which was really cool.
Right. That was really cool.
Gosh, man, there were a lot of cool references in there. We saw Hayden Christensen looking. And look, man, Hayden, if you're listening to this, which I imagine you follow us, you look better than I think you've ever looked, man, as Clone Wars Anakin, right? This is a version of him that we've never seen in live action.
In real life,
Right, the animated version of him, whatever, it was fine.
Yeah.
But, seeing him, they did such a good job bridging the live action, and he's wearing
he looked exactly like his animated character. It was super cool. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think they did a good job. You can tell the voice. I mean, again, if you're a longtime fan like I am, you can tell a lot of the voices and that sort of thing aren't quite right.
Sure.
But you can tell that they studied to get the mannerisms right between the two of them, and their dynamic, and obviously having, Filoni who was involved in that. Those series, and understood the dynamic because they created this character, that helps. But I thought it was really well done. And to see, like, I've seen now on TikTok, people have lined up, like, the way Anakin stands talking to her, sort of a little, I wouldn't say condescendingly, but certainly he's the authoritarian in the conversation. And the way she's looking up at him sort of defiantly, I'm like, man, it does. Like, they put them side by side, and it looks just like it's from the show.
Yeah. That's really cool. Agreed. That was fun.
But yeah, he had the Clone Wars haircut. He had the armor. It looked great. But also, I want to say, I don't know if it's really the next thing on the list, but I told Brie, I said, like, I just hope we see Rex. And we did for just a moment.
We did.
I think it was Tamara Morrison's voice. It wasn't the animated Rex's voice. Okay. And, like, Rex is in, he's in episode 3 at least, I think, but he's not like a major character or anything.
Right.
I assume Tamara did his voice there, but, like, there's a guy out there somewhere who has voiced, like, every clone in the animated series. The Clone Wars, which is like 100 characters or 200 characters, I don't know, and which are all clones, right? So whatever. Sure. But now he's done the Bad Batch, where he has to, like, really specifically change the voice because they're all in the same boat together. He's like 99% of the cast of that show. Yeah, and then that's funny. That's a good point. Rebels, which I'd love to see Rex show up in modern day in Ahsoka, but I don't know if he's still alive. So that is to say, the character, not the actor. Tamara Morrison have to play him now. Yeah, but anyway, sure. It was really cool seeing Rex, and they did the armor and everything looked really good. It was cool. I don't know. Yeah,
for sure.
You want to take one?
Sure. So in this moment when we are seeing them kind of reliving the past, there's this conversation, and and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it was when they split to the scene where they're in Mandalore. So, like, it kind of started the conversation there. Then they're in the Siege of Mandalore, correct? Or was that when they start having this conversation? It doesn't. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But in one of those moments, Ahsoka kind of has this existential crisis or something, where she's kind of like, "Is this all it's about? Like, is it just about fighting all the time?" And he kind of says, like, Ahsoka, in this, like, time, like, this is, you need to be a soldier. Like, in my era, in the Jedi's of past or whatever of old, they were peacekeepers, right? But then now we have to be warriors. Now we have to be soldiers. Right. And she made this comment, and, in this conversation they were talking, I remember she's like, is that what I'm gonna, have to teach someday, is just how to fight? And Anakin has this really interesting perspective. He says that I'm teaching you how to lead, how to survive, and to do that, you have to fight. Like, all these things I'm teaching you, fighting is a component of how you achieve this, but what I'm really teaching you is how to be a leader, how to survive, and then in doing that, you have to fight. And it's interesting that, she says, what if I stop fighting? And he goes, well, you'll die. It's interesting, this live or die thing. And I don't know if we have it in here really to talk about, but I kind of wonder in my head, I'm like, is this live or die thing, is this her inner struggle in the water, or like what in her, like, that moment of life or death? Or is it like her future and, like, what she has to do after this? You know what I mean? Is it like the fight for the future, or is it the fight to live right now? And I don't really know that we know that, but it could be both. It could be neither. Yeah. Here's
my take. And this is on a maybe a more spiritual level, which, I think Star Wars likes to dance around a little bit and not really define exactly. But I wonder if live or die is the light and death is the dark, in the sense, sort of, right?
That absolutely makes sense. That's a good point. Yep.
The struggle that she's had with violence and everything, like, that's the good in her trying to make sense of this. You know what I mean? And and it's one of the problems that the Jedi Order had, was not sort of like checking themselves. And the truth is, well, I'll just dig into this now. The nature of the test, right? So Luke in Empire Strikes Back has a moment in the cave, right? he's training with Yoda and everything, and they're taking a break, and I think he puts his little jacket on and everything, and he starts to like sense something, and he walks up and he says, "There's something out there, you know," and look, Yoda says it's a domain of evil, and Luke starts going that way, and he picks up his belt, which has his blaster and has his lightsaber on it, and Yoda says, "Your weapons, you will not need them." And Luke looks at him for a second, and then keeps walking and puts his belt on, right? So Luke then walks into the cave, and he faces a vision of Darth Vader. And for the first of many times, we see him draw on Vader first. He pulls his lightsaber out first, right?
Yeah.
And there's this whole, I think it's just before this that that Yoda says, Jedis use the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack, right? Now, if you look at the Clone Wars, you could call that defense, right?
Sure.
But there are a lot of these instances where it's kind of cloudy and hazy. And
yeah.
So Yoda goes in there, and he goes right to attack.
Luke.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sorry, yes, Luke does. And he, slices Vader's helmet, whatever, and it falls. Again, this is all vision. And it sort of explodes, and you see Luke's face in there, right? And my picture of it has always been, by coming in here and like using your weapon, like coming in here to kill with aggression, thinking, coming in here to attack, you're giving in to fear and to aggression and to evil, right?
Yeah.
And so you will become what you came here to destroy, right?
Right. Exactly.
It's like I see here what I am, in fact, It's I think it's this kind of a cool moment. And later on, Yoda knows, I think, as he goes in, that he's going to fail, right?
Sure.
But later on, he's getting ready to go off and help Han and Leia, and Yoda says, like, remember your failure at the cave, right? And as time has gone on and they've made more Star Wars, this has become, at least in my understanding, there's a Jedi trial, right? Every Jedi needs to pass this trial, and it's not the same for everybody in order to become a full Jedi Knight, which is why at the end, not at the end, but near the beginning of Return of the Jedi, Yoda is dying, and he says, like, already have that which you require, whatever, and Luke says, so I am a Jedi, and he goes, no, not until you confront Vader, right? Now, and to me, I remember as a kid thinking, like, why? You know what I mean? Like, anyway, but when he goes to confront Vader, like, that whole moment builds up, and he does give into his aggression a little bit, you know what I mean? And again, he's worried for his friends, fear, all that, right?
Yep.
And so he pulls a lightsaber out, and he goes to attack the Emperor, and Vader, steps in, and they have their long fight and everything. And then finally, Luke reaches a point where he says, I won't fight you, whatever. And anyway, they fight a little more after that. But Luke throws away his lightsaber, and he says, you failed, Your Highness. I'm a Jedi like my father before me, or whatever, right? And that's when it all goes off and whatever. But that was Luke's pass of the test, right? He was tempted by fear, by the dark side, and this time he passed. And passing might mean you die. I mean, that's the thing. And like, there's a sort of a morality there that's higher than the importance of survival, which is what Ahsoka's whole training has been about, right? So the idea being, like, now I can, like, do the right thing. I can be the right person. I can whatever, you know what I mean? Even if it costs my life, this is still the right way, I think, right?
Right.
So this is sort of eventually where the test, for Ahsoka comes around. And I really think that the idea was, this is her Jedi trial. She never got this under Anakin's training. This is it.
Yeah.
And so at the very end, when Anakin loses it again and comes after her, she at the very end, she manages to disarm him, but rather than killing him, she throws it away.
Yep.
And it's like,
and
she says,
like,
I
immediately
choose to live.
Yeah. He steps back.
Right.
And like, everything softens. He's back.
You see the transformation.
Yeah. It's cool. I mean, even just the process leading up to that too. I loved how they like had this flickery Darth Vader thing, which was just, I mean, his lightsaber is red now. There's that where you're like, okay, it was blue at the beginning when he was just kind of her master. And then at this end point because there was that moment when they were arguing. So I was wrong. So my first thing I was saying, that was when they were in the Clone Wars scene, and then they were on Mandalore and they have a deeper conversation. And she is talking about this legacy of death. Is that all that it is? And he was kind of saying, you're more than that. And she's like, so are you. And she's like, you're more powerful, more dangerous than anyone thought. And you can sense in her this fear of of becoming him, of becoming what he became, sort of. And he's like, you don't get it. You're not even getting it. And I think it's this reality, like you said, that it's this, you can have that and make the choice that he didn't make. There's nothing about him and what he taught her that was bad or that was, not proper Jedi training. It's just that she's afraid, just like Luke was. And so then there's this moment where suddenly they're back in the world between worlds, and he is the greatest fear of her, of what he became. Right. It's Vader. It's this, late stage Anakin, whatever, pre-Vader, and the darkest Anakin that she knew, and
a perversion of someone she loved and trusted. Yeah.
And it's this moment that does test her. And obviously this is all part of, like we said, whether it's a vision, whether it's a Force ghost, we don't know the whole premise of all this, but it was all so intentional. I don't think, you and I had the conversation, I think, in the last episode, is this going to be a trick of the dark side? Is this something? And I do not believe that's the case. This feels more like something, grown out of genuinely trying to get her to a point where she's completed, like you said, this Jedi trial. She passed it, and this vision in front of her became his best version of himself too, or whatever, back to when he was at his best or whatever.
Yeah. She says, I choose to live, throws it away. He sort of transforms, and he says, there's hope for you yet. Right.
Yeah.
Now, at the very beginning, I mean, so that was, to me, this was definitely a good thing, right? I mean, when we saw the end of the last episode, I thought this is a bad thing, and it's trying to trick us into thinking it's a good thing. But at the beginning,
I was very happy to find that out. By the way, I liked that this was a good thing and not a dark thing. But anyway, go ahead.
Right. I want to like Anakin now. I feel like we've seen enough of evil him and Vader and everything.
Sure.
So at the beginning, he says, I didn't expect to be seeing you so soon, right? And then he asks her, he said, well, trust me, you lost or whatever. She doesn't remember for a second, and then she goes, right, Balin's skull, and he says, you remember, good, you might have a chance to live or whatever,
right?
And it was that's sort of cryptic, but now piecing these things together,
right? I
guess. Maybe this is Force Ghost Anakin, and that's just how they exist in the world there. Because, he may just be thinking oh, Ahsoka must have died, and so that's why she's joined me here. And then he finds out that she is in fact not completely dead because she can remember how she died or something. Whatever, there's some sign there that tells him that that
she's
Ahsoka
still partly alive.
Yeah,
she's only mostly
she's not
dead.
Beyond hope, whatever. Again, I still don't understand how she got here.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure what Anakin is or anything, but it feels like that's a little what they're hinting at, that somehow this is in the world between worlds where Anakin is the Force ghost and he's come to help her,
I think so. It feels that way.
But
yeah.
It was a relief to me. I didn't want him to be evil again. And
no.
Anyway, so she wakes up in the ocean, like you said. I wrote down Anakin leaves stage left. I loved the transition where she starts to hear I don't know if it's the waves, or the smashing
I think it's the ocean
or something. Yeah. And he kind of looks up, and she looks up, and the camera pans around, and he's gone.
Yeah, it was great.
It was kind of neat. But anyway, it was I think a really well done piece. I was really really pleased and impressed and whatever. So do you have anything else to say about that theme? The whole whatever. Completing her
I don't think so. I think the arc of it was awesome. I mean, for them to be able to do that in one episode, it just felt really clean and very it's something that feels like it should have taken longer, but it didn't need to. It was this nice, concise, here's where you're at. This is what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
And I need you just to get it, like suck it up and get it right now. This is your chance. This is your shot.
And which was sort of his,
leadership anyway, sort of the way
his teaching style. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
absolutely. It worked. Yeah. So it was cool. The whole way they did it was just, This
was a really long episode too. It was I think 55 minutes or something like that. But I had criticized earlier episodes for being 20 or 25, and I was just it did not bode well to me for the show. I think it's weird to break it up quite like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm not really a control freak or anything, but I like to know how long I'm going to have each time. And when one ends before I expect it to, it gets me. But
startling. Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, I love this episode.
Yeah.
So the other theme that we really want to dig into was what I called finding the way, right? So they're trying to track down Ezra and Thrawn, but now they're also trying to track down Sabine and Morgan, right? And Baylan and Shin.
And Baylan. And the whole crew.
So they it's sort of funny, Ahsoka has this sort of awakening, and I had written down a note, but Brie mentioned that people have talked about it on TikTok too. I said, now she's Ahsoka the White, because she sort of she came back, not maybe from the grave, but
kind of
she's come back with a new sense of wisdom and with a new outlook,
right?
And I thought it was cool to see, and
a whole new demeanor.
Everybody was sort of criticizing, myself included, a little bit, the nature of her attitude and everything, of Ahsoka's attitude and acting grim, and cold, especially to Sabine and everything, and feeling this just doesn't feel like Ahsoka. Why would she be this way? She was a little bit, I don't know, grumpy, I think I said in the last episode. But anyway, so she comes back and she is her optimistic, hopeful self, and it feels like it works really well. And
I said even happy. There's a moment when she and Huyang are on the ship, and she's basically I'm gonna go talk to him. She's just smiling with the Purgle out there, and she wanders out, and she comes back in, and she's all right, well, she knocks, and she's let's go in there, and she comes back in, and he's so they're gonna take us? They know where Sabine is? And she's I don't know. I'm just gonna let's just see where we go. Maybe, and it's but she's got this almost this weight lifted, and I think honestly it goes back to this fear that she was carrying of of I don't know if it was becoming too much like Anakin or that warrior mentality or whatever, but something has released her. Something has given her this peace and this whole mindset shift or personality demeanor, whatever shift, which was a pleasant shift. I think I'm happy to see her happier and more peaceful, more zen, you know? Yeah.
No, I think you hit it exactly. I think she was, and I don't know if I would have put it this way before this episode, but she was burdened by fear. And it seems like the biggest fear was fear of Anakin, Darth Vader, and fear of becoming Anakin or Darth Vader, and she's had this really, from the time she left, she's been, not that she hates everybody on the Jedi Council or anything like that, but she's really certain that this is not right. Yeah. Yeah. And so she's done her own thing and everything. And I almost feel like that loss of hope in that, that's made her more fearful that it's well, you guys aren't doing it right, and can turn to the dark side. Now it's I
was going to say,
she's
seeing
got
what happened,
all of this on her shoulders.
Sure. I was say, seeing what happened with Anakin, suddenly you go, oh, it all makes more sense now that what she realized, what she's been holding back all this time. And maybe the reason for her, I don't want to be a Jedi anymore. Don't call me a Jedi. I'm not a Jedi. Cause she was so afraid of the person who taught her, the person who educated her became one of the worst, most evil, Sith Lords ever, and it's for that, to watch that happen and fear for her own kind of whatever, destruction or what destruction she could cause if she fell into that, Yeah. So it makes you kind of go, oh, okay. It all makes a little more sense why she's so anti-Jedi, that she, because what she saw happen with her master, has made her afraid of the Jedi concept altogether, it seems like, or something,
Right.
Anyway,
it created a pessimism in her, a lack of faith that you can do this the right way still, or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
That, like, well, if they all failed, then I guess this whole thing is just screwed. It just doesn't.
Right. Yeah.
I want to bring up a quick point that I had in the notes that Ahsoka, holds the pieces of the map, and she uses a force thing, a force ability,
that memory power
force
thing.
echo,
That she has.
I think. Yeah.
Okay.
That it started out. I think the first time we saw it was with Rey in The Force Awakens, when she touches the Skywalker lightsaber, right?
Oh, right.
And like she's at Maz Kanata's place, and she touches it, and she has all these. You hear all these voices, and like Kanan Jarrus is in there. By the way, I love that Kanan's in is one of his. He's one of the voices in there.
I think you and I talked about that. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, Freddie Prinze Jr. To those who aren't close personal friends with him, Freddie is he's adamant that he doesn't ever want to play him again. Basically, like he loves the way they tied up Kanan's story, and he just doesn't want them to ruin it. And I appreciate that.
Try and come back in with something else, or bring him back to life or anything. Yeah. But still,
he really is, like, the more I think about it, he really is like one of my favorite Jedi of all the.
Well, wouldn't he have a Force ghost in theory? I mean, he was a Jedi, right?
Maybe, but what we learned at one point was that you have to learn how to do it.
How to do that? That's true. Yeah.
When they go into exile at the end of episode 3, Yoda says, "I have some training for you to do." That Qui-Gon reached out to Yoda through the Force, right? So, Anyway, it's whatever. It's complicated, whatever. But that is, I think, the first time we saw that power was in The Force Awakens, and then it was actually it's in the Jedi Fallen Order games too, which Bree's actually been playing. It's like my favorite thing is watching Bree play Jedi Fallen Order. It's a lot of fun.
That's fun.
But she said, maybe he'll sniff out a memory like Cal Katniss. His name is Cal Kestis in the game. Oh. But Cal Katniss is much funnier.
That's funny.
Anyway.
Yeah, I saw that when you and I were talking about stuff, and I was like, who is Cal Katniss? I don't know that name.
Yeah.
But just blew past.
Anyway,
I was like, whatever.
I think she was trying to be funny. I think she knew that wasn't his real name. But
I'm sure she did, yeah.
I got a good laugh out of it.
That's good.
Anyway, the Purgle comes sweeping in, and like you wrote down, like we should have seen that coming. And I agree almost to a point that it bothers me.
Yeah, me too. I was like, oh my gosh, how are they ever going to get to Sabine and stuff? And I'm like, oh, the one way that we already have seen in this show a couple of times.
That had me asking
around
some
above
questions.
The planet.
Right?
Yeah.
It had me wondering, why hasn't someone tried to do this before? You know what I mean? Like, why hasn't somebody tried to
necessarily control these things? Like that's the dilemma.
Not.
Is like, who knows where they're going?
Right. It's, I think mostly the reason it hasn't happened is because it's the story, right? But it does feel like you need a Force user, which there are fewer and fewer of them around.
Mm-hmm.
Why not try to communicate with the whales like the rebels knew happened? You know what I mean? Like, it's not like it's a secret that Ezra connected through the Force.
We all know that's what happened. Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway.
Right. Well, I will say this. One of the things...
When she finally did it, it was like, oh, obviously. Right?
Right. Yeah. I think what's funny, though, is... And I think this helps keep the story feeling like this isn't necessarily an option that others would have pursued, because we see this moment where it's like, oh, gosh, all she has to do is talk to the whales and tell them what she needs, and they'll take her to Sabine and probably Ezra, and maybe they know both of these people, you know. And then she comes back, and we're like, and it's this like, oh yeah, why didn't we think about this? Just bring a Jedi in and have him talk to the whale. And she comes up again, and she's like, oh, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Well, I just mean, like,
it's going to work.
Right. But my guess is, like, she couldn't communicate with them for whatever reason. They're a different, you know. It didn't sound like she had communicated with them. It sounded like she was just like, "Well, take me where you want to go," kind of thing. I think that's exactly it. Is that, you know, I think even when Ezra communicated with them, it was like, we don't speak the same language. I'm just kind of hoping they get the gist because of my feeling through the Force or something. And correct.
At some point, he reached out to them and called them to come take Thrawn away. Right at the end of Rebels, but anyway, it wasn't like
but I just think
it was his to command or anything at any point.
Right. And that's what I was saying. It helps hold the story of like not anybody could have just come and chatted with the Purgle and had them take them wherever they wanted, you know?
Right,
so even though it's like, oh duh, like the Purgle are around, we've seen them, they're at this planet, you know, of course. Now, one question I have, a little question would be like, did we know that this is where the Purgle like lived? You know, is this a common knowledge that, or did Morgan Elsbeth discover this and then everybody found her and then it was like, oh my gosh, because we see the Purgle when they're heading to the planet, right? Isn't that kind of our first, when they're trying to escape a few episodes ago?
You know, the knowledge that the Republic or whoever had of the Purgle is a little bit unknown, you know what I mean? But Huyang said in this series, one of the first episodes, that somewhere in the Jedi archives there is information about how the Jedi learned of these space whales that traveled between galaxies, whatever, right? So like, apparently the Jedi knew. And one of the things that I think is cool about these kind of things is that it's like, you know, for however many millennia the Jedi have existed, they've always been gathering information, right? So like there's this archive of like everything. So it's like no one can know it all. You know what I mean? So it's like there's got to be stuff in there that like, oh yeah, it's just forgotten knowledge, you know, because it was 8,000 years ago. And I don't know, I find that very interesting. Yeah. But yeah, so we knew that they existed. We knew to some degree that they could travel between galaxies. But the truth is, we don't 100% know. Maybe Morgan does. I don't know. That they always go to the same one. You know what I mean? Sure. This map was about like narrowing the beam to know where they're going, right? Sure. So like if they jumped in a Purgle, there was no knowing necessarily that they were going to the right galaxy, you know? So it's kind of shrug your shoulders. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting angle on it. It's just the, you know, historically, how does this kind of thing work? And I don't know. But it made perfect sense that that's how they would travel to try and get to where they need to go. Yeah. You know, it makes sense, obviously. Yeah. Up until we saw the hyperspace frame, we would have said like, yeah, you got to take a Purgle. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, how else are you going to do it? How they're gone. They broke the map. What do we do? You know? Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I loved also that they just had the big one take it inside his mouth. I don't know why that made me so happy. The sort of Jonah and the whale dynamic. I thought it was fun. It was. That was really funny. Ouch. Yeah. But careful. Anyway, that was I think a really cool way to show Ahsoka. I mean, you mentioned this earlier, but lighter, freer. You know, again, if you just think about like she's not afraid almost anymore. Playful. Like yeah. If you can look at this as she, you know, sort of banished fear in her Jedi Trial. You know, she whatever fear of becoming evil and all these different things, and just stuck to being the good guy. You know, it's like now she walks out there and it's like, well, who knows where we go? Maybe we die. Right. And that's just kind of, you know, that's kind of it. And I don't know. I thought it was really cool. There's also like, I don't know. The Force isn't, you know, like God exactly in this or anything, but there's a certain amount of like trust in the Force and the Force be with you and that sort of thing that like, there's talk of destiny and that kind of thing occasionally in Star Wars. So like, who knows? You know, they might be what they're implying is that she's just kind of like, well, this seems like the right thing, so I'm just going to hope it is. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But it was also, awesome like episode. I said, it's cool seeing her wardrobe change and all that. She's in white now and she's happy again. It was pretty cool. It was cool. So I don't know. Do you have any other things? Because I got my one last plea at the bottom. Yeah, I would say go for it. I don't have anything else for that. Okay. So, Dave, I assume since he watches too, right? Both him and Freddie. I assume they get together. To be honest, Freddie. And you know, maybe John's there too. John, if you can speak on my behalf with the guys, I'd appreciate it. Sure. They've done this metamorphosis sort of with Ahsoka now, right? So she's gone through this sort of like difficult spell. Even when she met with Mando, like I felt like she was kind of a little bit serious and grim in a way that she wasn't when she was younger, right? Yeah. But she's gone through something now. And the last time we saw it, when we saw her and Balin interacting, and we saw him being so, I don't know, he was saying, like, you and your master, your legacy is destruction and death, right? Now, I mean, like that was one of the things that she brought up with Anakin.
Yeah.
It's as though she believes him, that like that's all that they were good at. That's all that they brought, you know? And so she's now worked through those things, right? And she's come out the other side, you know, enlightened in one way or another.
Sure.
So now maybe is the time for her to convince Balin that he's wrong.
Right.
Pull him over to the light side, maybe?
I mean, I wouldn't be against that.
Please, Dave.
I would be on board with that.
Please.
Let's run that up the flagpole and, you know, make sure the
like
top
I said,
people
John,
know.
You know, Dave, even run it past George. He might be cool with this.
Yeah, I think he'd be on board with that. He likes a good redemptive story, you know?
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Man, like I said, I feel like we could talk about this episode forever.
I know.
Yeah. It was a heck of a thing, man. And
I do feel like, though, that there's so much that also just doesn't need to be talked about. Like, it just, like, and it was like, yeah, this just worked. It just felt right.
It was
all,
good.
like, you know, yeah. It was great.
The cinematography was big in this one for me. That was one of the other things I wanted to bring up, separate from our little themes. But the shots, the like drone shots of like the sea, and then this was I guess the last episode, becoming Ahsoka laying in the water or whatever, was really cool.
That was cool.
Or no,
for sure.
that was last episode. But then
where she was laying in the world between worlds, you mean, like between the two. Yeah.
Right. But then there were also a couple of shots with the ghosts in it. The first one being, I think it's when they take off, and it's I'm trying to think of Jacen. Is it Jacen and Chopper are still standing on the cliff, and the X-wings and the ghost, they just take off and like fly kind of up over you. And I just thought, I mean, I'm a big old school Star Wars fan, but the Ghost is in close contention for coolest ship with the Falcon. I'm telling you, the two are both so cool. But like, we get these shots now in this and in the Mandalorian of these ships with detail that we've never seen before, and it's done. I can't remember. I remember hearing about it, one of the background things, but it's detail that you wouldn't actually see from that distance. But there's the other shot is when they're searching through the water, and Carson is on the line with Ahsoka, with Hera, and the X-wings are here, and they kind of fly off, and the Ghost just kind of goes woof down in their place. You know what I mean? Right over the water. Ah, it's so cool.
Yep. Yeah, it was cool.
So good job, Dave.
It was great. Yeah.
Freddie, get on board.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. We need some Kanan.
All right.
Back in our lives.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, this was an excellent episode.
Excited to see what happens next week.
It feels like they've stalled as much as they can. They've got 3 episodes left. So it seems like
is it eight episodes?
Gotta be going to the world, to the other galaxy. It seems like that's got to be our next thing. I think we've likely seen.
I hope we make it there this season. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we have to. I think it has to be. Like
I'm
this
sure we
next
will.
episode pretty much, because
I think you're right.
Right now, it's probably Hera's got nothing but bureaucracy to deal with now, and this is going to be Ahsoka finding Sabine and whatever from now on. So I'm excited for it. Really
for
excited.
Sure. Me too. Should be good.
All right.
Sweet.
Well, I'm Nate.
And I'm Rach.
And you've been watching Pew Pew Time.
Pew pew.
Hey, you got it. I wondered if you were going to get the pew pews this time. Pew pew.
Pew pew.